For years, David Beckham and Victoria Beckham carefully built a flawless public image, powerful, polished, untouchable. But that image cracked wide open when their eldest son, Brooklyn Beckham, publicly turned against them in defense of his wife, Nicola Peltz. What began as whispers of tension between the Beckham and Peltz families has spiraled into a deeply personal and very public family war. At the center of it all stands Nicola's billionaire father, Nelson Peltz, a man known for power, precision, and control. Insiders claim he was never fully convinced that Brooklyn truly belonged in his daughter's world, and that skepticism has quietly shaped the dynamic from the beginning. The breaking point came when Brooklyn posted an emotional statement accusing his parents of twisting the truth, prioritizing their image over family, and most explosively, disrespecting Nicola. There was no softening of the message, no attempt at diplomacy. He made it clear he stood by his wife completely and had no interest in repairing the relationship. With his parents, what stunned fans wasn't just the accusations, but the finality in his tone. There was no olive branch, no suggestion of working things out, just a clean, sharp break. According to sources close to the Beckhams, the post did not come out of nowhere. Just days earlier, David and Victoria had reportedly sent Brooklyn a private handwritten letter in a last attempt to reach him directly. Communication had already collapsed by then. Brooklyn had allegedly sent a cease-and-desist notice demanding his parents stop mentioning him publicly and that all further contact go through lawyers. That move sent shockwaves through the family and fueled speculation that someone else might be influencing him behind the scenes. While Brooklyn insists he is finally standing on his own, critics point out that his life appears more intertwined than ever with the Peltz family. He lives within their orbit, moves in their elite social circles, and reportedly communicates with his parents only through intermediaries. To some, it looks less like independence and more like full assimilation into a new power structure. Many trace the fracture back to the wedding, particularly the now infamous first dance. Brooklyn has claimed that his mother hijacked a moment meant for him and Nicola, leaving his wife humiliated. Guests reportedly felt the mood shift instantly, and Nicola was said to have been visibly upset. What should have been a symbol of unity, instead became a lingering wound after that night. Insiders suggest lines were drawn. Brooklyn allegedly faced a painful choice between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his mother, and he chose Nicola. Since then, invitations have been declined, family events skipped, and communication reduced to near silence. Meanwhile, Nelson Peltz has remained publicly silent, a silence that many interpret as deliberate. Known in corporate circles as a strategic and decisive figure, he has never openly criticized Brooklyn, but reports suggest he views his son-in-law as unfocused, pointing to Brooklyn's shifting career attempts in photography, cooking, and branding. In contrast to the disciplined empire David built through football and business, Brooklyn's path has appeared uncertain. A strict prenuptial agreement signed before the wedding further underscored the imbalance of power. If the marriage were ever to end, Brooklyn would walk away only with what he and Nicola built together, not a share of the Peltz fortune. For the Beckhams, the concern was never about money, but about emotional security. If Brooklyn lost both his marriage and his family ties, he would be left without a safety net. Friends from Brooklyn's past have also spoken out, including a former youth football coach from his time at Queen's Park Rangers, who described a childhood shaped by pressure, anxiety, and intense security. Growing up under constant public scrutiny may have left Brooklyn vulnerable, searching for identity and stability. Nicola, by contrast, never left her own support system. She remained rooted in her family's world, financially independent, and surrounded by her inner circle. Brooklyn, however, distanced himself from the structure that raised him and anchored himself entirely in one household. Whether that represents love and loyalty or emotional isolation depends on perspective. Brooklyn's siblings have remained close to their parents, continuing to show public support and maintain family ties, which has only intensified speculation about why he alone chose to walk away. Online, some praise him for setting boundaries, while others question the cost. Behind the scenes, insiders say the distance has been brutal. No casual calls, No spontaneous visits, only formal and carefully managed communication. Rebuilding trust at that level of estrangement becomes incredibly difficult. Rumors eventually surfaced about a possible reunion during a major family milestone. When both families reportedly found themselves under the same roof again, witnesses described palpable tension. There were polite nods and stiff smiles before David quietly broke the ice with a simple acknowledgement that it had been too long. Emotional conversations followed, even a few hugs, but the atmosphere remained fragile. It was not a full reconciliation, just a small crack in the wall that had divided them. Whether that crack widens or seals shut again remains uncertain. Today, Brooklyn stands firm in his decision, insisting he has no regrets. David and Victoria, according to friends, continue to hold on to hope, willing to welcome their son back. Without conditions, Nicola remains at the center of it all, seen by some as fiercely protective and by others as strategically influential. Nelson continues to say nothing, his silence speaking louder than any statement. The once picture-perfect Beckham family now exists in two separate worlds, bound by history but divided by choice. Whether time heals the fracture or pride keeps it frozen, the story has already become a modern tale of love, loyalty, power, and the high cost of choosing sides as the dust slowly settles. The emotional aftermath remains far more complicated than any headline can capture. Those close to David Beckham say that behind the composed public image is a father who still checks his phone, still waits for a message that might never come. Victoria Beckham, often described as strong and controlled, is said to feel the fracture just as deeply, though she guards it more carefully. For parents who built not just a brand but a tightly knit family identity, the absence of their eldest son has created a silence that lingers at every gathering. Meanwhile, Brooklyn Beckham continues to double down publicly on his independence. In interviews and social posts, he reinforces the idea that he is finally living life on his own terms. Yet observers note that every move he makes is closely aligned with his wife's world. Nicola Peltz remains unwavering by his side, projecting unity and confidence. To supporters, their bond represents strength and loyalty. To critics, it signals isolation from everything that once defined him. Behind the scenes, the dynamic with Nelson Peltz adds another layer of complexity. As a seasoned investor accustomed to high-stakes negotiations and strategic maneuvering, Nelson operates in a world where leverage and control matter. Even without speaking publicly, his influence looms large. In elite circles, perception shapes reality, and Brooklyn's estrangement from his parents has inevitably shaped how he is viewed within that sphere. Fair or not, cutting ties with one powerful dynasty while integrating fully into another raises questions about autonomy and long-term stability. There is also the quiet psychological weight of identity. Brooklyn grew up as the son of global icons, his childhood defined by security teams, flashing cameras, and constant expectation. Breaking away may feel like reclaiming control, a declaration that he is more than just a last name. But carving out an identity in the shadow of both the Beckham and Peltz empires is no small task. Each career pivot, each new venture is scrutinized not just as a personal project, but as a test of legitimacy. Success would silence critics. Failure would amplify every doubt that has already been whispered behind closed doors. The siblings. Continued closeness with their parents further complicates the narrative. Their steady presence at family milestones reinforces the idea that reconciliation is possible, just not yet realized. It keeps the doors symbolically open while underscoring Brooklyn's distance. That contrast fuels ongoing speculation. Is this truly about deep-rooted dysfunction, or is it a uniquely personal rupture shaped by marriage, pride, and miscommunication? For now, both families appear to be navigating a fragile equilibrium. Publicly, the temperature has cooled. There are fewer explosive statements, fewer pointed social media messages. But beneath that surface calm lies unresolved history. True reconciliation would require more than a single emotional meeting or carefully worded exchange. It would demand humility on all sides, an acknowledgement of hurt without turning it into a weapon, and a willingness to separate love from power. Whether that happens remains uncertain. Time has a way of softening even the hardest stances, especially when family bonds are involved. Yet time can also cement distance, making estrangement feel normal. Brooklyn stands at a crossroads between the legacy that shaped him and the new world he has chosen. His parents stand at the edge of that divide, hopeful but cautious. Nicola remains protective of the life she and her husband have built, and Nelson's silence continues to frame the background of the story. In the end, this saga is less about headlines and more about identity, loyalty, and the delicate balance between marriage and family. The outcome will not be decided by public opinion or tabloid narratives, but by private conversations. Quiet forgiveness, and whether pride gives way to perspective. Till then, the story remains unfinished, suspended between fracture and healing. Watched closely by a world that once believed the picture was perfect. As months pass, what becomes clearer is that this is no longer just a clash of personalities. It's a collision of philosophies. The Beckham brand was built on unity, discipline, and the idea that family stands together no matter the pressure. David Beckham built his legacy through relentless focus, transforming talent into an empire. Victoria Beckham reinvented herself. From pop stardom into a respected force in fashion, their world runs on resilience and public composure. Problems are handled quietly, strategically, and with long-term vision. The Peltz world operates differently. It is rooted in corporate power, financial dominance, and airtight protection of assets and reputation. Nelson Peltz has spent decades navigating boardrooms where weakness is exploited and loyalty is measured in results. In that environment, emotion takes a backseat to leverage. Stability is not sentimental, it is structural. And when Brooklyn Beckham stepped fully into that orbit through his marriage to Nicola Peltz, he didn't just join a new family. He entered a completely different system of power. That shift may explain why reconciliation feels so complex. Isn't simply about hurt feelings over a wedding moment or a misunderstood social media post. It's about control over narrative, influence over identity, and the subtle tug-of-war between two dynasties accustomed to shaping their own stories. In elite families, perception is currency. Every appearance, every silence, every gesture carries. Wait, for Brooklyn, the internal battle may be the most intense of all. On one side is the family that raised him, the childhood filled with global travel, football stadiums, and flashing cameras. On the other is the marriage he has publicly defended at all costs. The life he insists represents his true independence. Walking back toward his parents could feel like betraying his wife. Standing firm could mean permanently altering the bond. With his siblings and the people who shaped his early years, psychologists often note that when someone grows up under extreme visibility, identity development can become tangled with public expectation. Brooklyn's attempts to find his professional lane, whether through photography, cooking, or branding, have unfolded under relentless scrutiny. Every pivot becomes a headline. Every setback becomes a narrative about directionless privilege. That pressure alone could push anyone toward the comfort of a smaller, more controlled inner circle. Yet isolation, even when chosen, has consequences. When communication shrinks to lawyers and intermediaries, emotions harden, misunderstandings calcify into assumptions. Silence begins to feel safer than vulnerability. And once a family reaches that stage, rebuilding trust requires more than apologies. It requires a redefinition of boundaries. There is also the question of pride. Public conflicts are uniquely difficult to resolve because any reconciliation risks looking like a retreat. For Brooklyn, returning warmly to his parents after such strong public statements could appear inconsistent. For David and Victoria, embracing him without acknowledgement of the pain might feel dismissive of their own hurt. For Nicola, supporting a full reunion could mean reopening wounds she believes were never properly addressed. Still, history shows that family bonds, especially between parents and children, are rarely erased entirely. Time changes perspective. Milestones, births, anniversaries, losses often soften rigid positions. A single quiet conversation, away from cameras and advisors, can do more than 100 carefully crafted public statements at present. The story remains suspended between two possible futures. In one, pride prevails, distance becomes permanent, and both families quietly accept a divided existence. In the other, small gestures accumulate a message, a shared moment, a private acknowledgement of fault until the wall gradually lowers. What makes this saga so compelling is not just fame or wealth. It's the universal tension at its core. The struggle between loyalty to the family you come from and loyalty to the family you create. Most people face that crossroads in private. Brooklyn's happens under global scrutiny, and perhaps that is the quiet tragedy beneath the spectacle. Behind the power plays and whispered influence, behind the speculation about control and independence, there is still a son and two parents navigating heartbreak in real time. Whether the ending is reconciliation or permanent separation will depend not on billion-dollar fortunes or public narratives, but on something far simpler and far harder: the willingness to listen without defending, to forgive without winning, and to choose connection over control. As the narrative stretches on, the public fascination hasn't faded, it has evolved. What began as gossip about a wedding moment has transformed into a case study of modern dynasty dynamics. Families, two different value systems, and one marriage sitting at the fault line. And at the center of that fault line remains Brooklyn Beckham, a man still trying to define himself outside. The shadow of a surname that once defined everything. Those close to David Beckham say he has adopted patience as strategy, not silence. Out of defeat, but silence out of restraint. He understands media cycles. He knows public sympathy shifts. More importantly, he knows that pushing too hard could drive his son further away. Victoria Beckham, described as more emotionally guarded, is said to wrestle with a deeper fear, not just losing access, but losing influence entirely. A mother's bond is powerful, but so is the bond between spouses. Those bonds compete. The tension can feel existential. On the other side, Nicola Peltz continues to project calm certainty. Publicly affectionate, unwavering in her support, she has framed the situation as a matter of boundaries and respect. To her supporters, she represents a partner who refuses to tolerate perceived disrespect. To critics, she embodies the quiet consolidation of control that often happens when a new family unit forms around one dominant nucleus. And then there is Nelson Peltz, whose absence from interviews may be the loudest statement of all. In corporate warfare, silence is rarely accidental. It can be a signal of confidence or of calculated detachment. By not engaging publicly, he avoids emotional framing and keeps the situation transactional. In high-level power structures, emotion clouds leverage. Distance preserves it. But here's the deeper layer. Few headlines address. Power struggles within families are rarely about power alone. They are about fear. Fear of losing relevance. Fear of losing control. Fear of being replaced. For parents, watching a child fully attached to another family can feel like erasure. For a spouse, sensing lingering parental influence can feel like intrusion. When both fears operate simultaneously, even small incidents ignite larger wars. Brooklyn's search for professional identity adds fuel to that fire. Every new venture becomes symbolic. If he succeeds independently, it validates his break. If he stumbles, it reinforces the narrative that he traded stability for uncertainty. That pressure alone could strain even the strongest marriage. Yet, publicly, the couple appears more united than ever. Unity, in moments like this, becomes both shield and statement. Observers have also begun to ask a subtler question. What happens when the spotlight eventually dims? Celebrity family feuds thrive on visibility, but attention shifts. New scandals emerge. When the headlines move on, what remains is the private reality. Will Brooklyn feel the absence more sharply without the adrenaline of public defense? David and Victoria grow weary of waiting? Will Nicola soften with time, or become even more protective? Reconciliation, if it comes, will likely happen quietly. Not through coordinated press leaks or staged photographs, but through something far less glamorous, a direct conversation, without lawyers, without advisors, without strategists. It would require Brooklyn to acknowledge pain on both sides, his parents to accept boundaries without interpreting them as rejection, and Nicola to trust that reconciliation does not equal surrender. Until then, the divide remains delicate, but real family gatherings continue without one chair filled. Public milestones are celebrated with subtle absences. Social media posts are analyzed for hidden meanings, and the once seamless image of unity now exists as two parallel narratives. What makes this saga resonate globally is that beneath the fame lies something painfully familiar. Almost everyone at some point must negotiate the line between the family that shaped them and the family they choose. Most do it privately. Brooklyn is doing it under international scrutiny. Whether history remembers this as a temporary fracture or a permanent split will depend on decisions made far from cameras. Pride can fortify walls. Love can dismantle them. The question is which force proves stronger in the end. For now, the story remains unfinished, balanced between estrangement and reconciliation, between loyalty and independence, between legacy and reinvention. And somewhere within that tension, a son, a wife, and two powerful families continue navigating a conflict that is as human as it is high profile.